open. So vote for your favorite king if you want to see them in the All-Star game. And we are joined by Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles and the Sacramento Bee. Chris Biderman, thank you for joining us.
Of course. How you guys doing?
We're good, man. We're good. Let's start here with the Kings and their dismantling of the Wizards, who aren't very good anyway. Take away from that, and would you say that we should put the trade machine away for the next couple weeks?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, my whole thing with the trade machine and sort of the talk has been, are the Kings going to be able to match what these teams are going to be asking for some potential upgrades, right? Like if you look at the Kings, while they do have some movable contracts, whether it's Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter, I don't know how appealing those guys are going to be to another team when, you know, there's going to be a long line of potential suitors for somebody like Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. And it's pretty clear, I think, even before the last two games when Keegan Murray's gotten red hot, that the Kings were never really in a position where they felt like they would trade Keegan Murray. So, yeah, I think there's certainly value in Sacramento keeping this core together and trying to see if Keegan can continue improving, if some of the other guys can continue improving. But yeah, like they to me are they can compete with just about anybody in the West. Night in and night out is the consistency is really the thing. And as good as it was for them to put up that offensive performance against the Wizards last night, you heard De'Aaron Fox talking about it too. Like they still allowed the 23rd ranked offense in Washington to shoot over 50%, right? And I know the Kings sort of fall into this trap sometimes, particularly at home, where they just feel like a run is coming offensively at any point, and that certainly happened in the third quarter. But for them to get to that next level, and Mike Brown talks about this all the time, it's about intensity, physicality on the defensive end, and they have to improve that if they're going to win in the playoffs. And as good as it was to see Domantas Sabonis have a triple-double against that team with very, very little, if any, inside presence, the question for me when it comes to Sabonis, regardless of whatever regular season stats he puts up, is can he replicate it in the playoffs? And you know, last year still happened. It should be fresh in everyone's mind. And it's a completely different game when the game changes to a postseason atmosphere and format and the way teams approach playing the Kings. So that to me is going to be a far bigger question for Sabonis than what he does on a Monday in December against one of the worst teams in the league.
Chris, I know you were around during the summer around the Kings when they were talking a lot about, especially during the California Classic, about Keegan's leap. And, you know, Luke Laux had compared the leap from year 1 to year 2 to Kawhi Leonard and all that stuff. And, you know, there's just a lot of hype around Keegan Murray and the leap that he was going to take and the impact he was going to have on this team this season. It was, you know, a slow start offensively for him. But obviously the 47 career high on Saturday. Do you feel like after that game, like, did you feel like you had to reevaluate how you kind of view Keegan's future, or was that kind of a fruition of something that you felt like, you know, the Kings had already believed in and had already kind of baked into their timeline?
Yeah, it felt like to me, and we've seen this all the time, right? Like in the NBA, sometimes the second season can be a little bit more difficult than a rookie season, particularly for somebody like Keegan, whose role has changed as dramatically as it has. Before his back injury, he was shooting 29% from three, and in the game since his returning, he's over 50%. Right. So it never felt like, given how good of a shooter we know Keegan Murray to be, it never felt like he was going to shoot 29% over the entire season. The question was, you know, would that efficiency come, and would he still be able to handle the increased load defensively and the playmaking load offensively after being mostly a spot up shooter last year? And I think the answer is going to be yes. Right. Like, we're not even at Christmas yet. And so Keegan Murray's numbers are climbing back up to what we would expect them to be. So for me, like, the shooting slump that Keegan went in to start the season never really felt like something to be all that concerning. But I think it's an indicator that like, if Keegan Murray plays well and shoots well, the Kings are going to be really, really difficult to beat. And if Keegan Murray doesn't, then the Kings are going to be a heck of a lot easier to beat, right? I think it's as simple as that. Like, they can score with anybody when Keegan Murray is going like he has been going the last few games. So to me, that's just a huge barometer for where the Kings are at, and not to put too much pressure on them, but like, if Keegan Murray does that in the playoffs, then the Kings are going to be able to win a round or two, or maybe even three, right? So if not, then the Kings are going to have a really hard time. So there's a lot on Keegan Murray's shoulders in terms of that. But no, like the early season shooting slump never really bothered me in terms of like what I thought his long-term future would look like. I still think he has a ceiling of an all-star player and somebody who could be in that all-NBA discussion down the line. But for now, to see him adjust and to see him come out of that shooting slump is got to be really encouraging.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles and the Sacramento Bee, switching over to the Niners, Chris, who got an early Christmas present last night with the Seahawks taking down the Eagles. Before we get into what this means, and I know Chris has some questions about the Ravens game. What do you think? I'm just sitting here watching this game, man, and I'm just trying to think to myself, and I know the Cardinals scored a little bit more than the Niners would have liked, but what is the Niners' biggest weakness, number one? And number two, does it even matter? Does it even matter? I'm thinking, okay, well, it was the nickel cornerback, and now the secondary is very strong. And then it was, we didn't know about Brock Purdy. Now we know about Brock Purdy. Do they even have any weaknesses right now? And they face the Ravens. The Ravens lose their stud running back in Keaton Mitchell. So I don't know, man. Is there anything that even worries you about this Niners team besides injury?
Not really. I mean, you look at, I think it's injury, right? If Deebo Samuel has to miss more time, if Trent Williams ever has to miss more time, like, and you can say that about any team. So, but like there's some historic numbers being thrown out there. If you guys follow DVOA, this is like one of the best teams in history. It's the best team from a DVOA perspective in 49ers history, which is saying something, right? There were some dominant teams in the 80s and 90s. And I think Aaron Schatz, who came on our podcast recently, had said that this is the best team from a DVOA perspective this late in the season since I think 2005 or something like that. Like this is a historically good team, and you look at the collection of talent and the quarterback play and the defense, like it's just extremely well-rounded. And you could make a case that, the 49ers interior of the offensive line was problematic earlier in the season. It feels like they've shored that up. I don't know if John Feliciano is going to stay the starter, but he's played at a pretty high level since coming in for Spencer Burford, who's been out with injury recently. Like I still have questions, like if the 49ers are down 14 points in the fourth quarter and they have to do the drop back game, like can the offensive line hold up against a really good pass rush when the defense knows the 49ers have to pass and throw the ball downfield? But to this point, like the Niners are just too good to fall behind by multiple scores and be in that position. So, there are questions like, can they win this type of game if the game script goes another way? They're just too good. Like they avoid getting into those scenarios, so it might not even matter. So at this point, with the way Brock Purdy's playing and all the numbers are pointing to him being an MVP, I do think Monday's game, particularly against Lamar Jackson, can go a long way towards helping him from a narrative perspective if he outplays Lamar. We've seen Brock Purdy, frankly, outplay a lot of the guys who are in that MVP discussion, maybe with the exception of Joe Burrow in that Cincinnati game before Burrow got hurt. But I don't know. Like, I don't know what the 49ers weakness is. You could say health, but I think you could say that about any team in the league. So I think this is probably the most well-rounded 49ers team we've seen under Kyle Shanahan, and it might be the most well-rounded 49ers team we've seen since they last won a Super Bowl in 1994-95.
So, I mean, on that note, I saw a tweet the other day that pretty much outlined, I mean, just all the statistics that are like the individual numbers. I think Brock's a touchdown away from 30. He's 200 yards away from 4,000. Debo's almost got 1,000 scrimmage yards. Kittle's almost at 1,000 receiving yards. Ayuk's already at 1,000. McCaffrey's 3 touchdowns away from Jerry Rice's record for touchdowns in a season. Where are you putting this offense all time? Is this the best 49er in the 49er scope of things, franchise wise? Is this the best offense you've seen? Would you put this in the category of best 49ers offenses, period? Where are you with where this offense stacks?
I think it's probably the most well-rounded and balanced offense the 49ers have ever had, right? Like as good as Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are, you wouldn't never say that either of those guys are as good as Jerry Rice, right? But not. Jerry Rice never had somebody like Christian McCaffrey flanking him or George Kittle flanking him or even, John Taylor was good, but he wasn't as good as Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, right? So I think in terms of the balance this offense has, the multitude of ways they can beat you. I think this is the best offense that the 49ers have had in their history. I wouldn't say Brock Purdy, obviously he has a long way to go. If he continues playing like this every year, then maybe we can have the discussion about, him comparing him to Joe Montana and Steve Young. But just from this season and the numbers that he's putting up, it's as good as any MVP season we've seen. Put his numbers, his pure numbers against any MVP of the last 10 years, and they compare pretty favorably, right? And so, I just, with the way Kyle Shanahan's calling plays, with the, Trent Williams is probably the best offensive lineman the 49ers have had in their history. I think that's fair to say. You can make a case that Christian McCaffrey is the best running back the 49ers have had in their history. You can make the same case for George Kittle at tight end. So they might not have a Jerry Rice, but they have overall a better complement of weapons. And with Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, this is like Bill Walsh type stuff. Like this is an evolved version of Bill Walsh's offense. So I think you can absolutely put this team in the conversation with any of the best 49ers offense in their history, which is saying a lot because this is a pretty historic franchise, particularly when it comes to the offensive side.
Chris Biderman, Candlestick Chronicles in the Sacramento Bee. Chris, thank you as always. We will talk to you again next week, and let's be honest, we'll probably be talking about another Niners W.
But yeah, I mean Monday's game is going to be a really fun one in terms of like, okay, how legit is this looking? And if they play Baltimore like they have all these other teams, and it's hard not to get excited about what the 49ers can be when it comes to winning the Super Bowl.
There you go, Chris. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.
Likewise, man.
All righty. That was Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles in the Sacramento Bee. We got to get to a break. When we